All right. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. We will give it a few more minutes while everybody is joining the call before we kick off today. Thanks for joining. We've got people still coming in, so we'll give it another minute or so. Hope everyone is having a good Wednesday, halfway through the week. So it's a good day. It's always a good day, right? The sun is out here, at least in New York. So. All right, we've got numbers going up, but we're still waiting on a few, so we're going to give it another minute or so. And don't worry, this isn't cutting into Q&A time. We will have plenty of time for Q&A. I'm sure you guys have a lot of questions, as I did, and I've already talked to Melanie and Anne about a few of them. So we're in for a great presentation today. So just to kind of get some of the housekeeping stuff out of the way, we are going to be getting a CPE for this session today. So keep an eye out in your email for that, as well as if you have any questions during the session. Jason has been kind enough to step in as our Q&A guy today. So he's going to be helping us answer those questions throughout the session. So please use the Q&A button in the chat and keep those questions coming. We will have some time to get those answered at the end of the session. All right, I think once we get up to 12:05, we will kick off. All right, guys, just checking in on the attendee side. We're still waiting for a few more, so I'm just going to check in with Sam and see how we're doing here. All right, so we are 5 minutes in, so we're going to get started. And thank you, everybody, for joining. Thanks for hanging out a little bit as we waited for some others to join. Appreciate it. As you may know, or some of you may not know, I'm Alyssa Bumbacco. I am the co-chair on the She Leads Tech, as well as the Emerging Professionals Committees for the ISACA board here in New York. So we've got a great event scheduled for today with Melanie and Anne from Protiviti, both to go through some of the insights into ESG. It's a really exciting presentation. I did get a chance to sit through our kind of rehearsal, and I think you guys will really enjoy it. So just a quick plug, we do have another event coming up on the She Leads Tech and Emerging Professional side. That is going to be a 3-day event, and it's scheduled for May 23rd, 24th, and 25th. So if you want to mark that down in your calendar, it's actually going to be the evenings of those days, probably starting around 6 p.m. each evening. So details will be coming out soon on that, but it's sure to be a great event. Also, unfortunately, I know we're still not in person. Hopefully for that She Leads event, we are going to be able to get at least one component of an in-person piece. But as a thank you for you guys joining today, we are going to be sending out a Starbucks gift card for you to get a coffee on us. And I know I keep saying this, but hopefully sooner rather than later, we'll get to do these coffee breaks in person again. So before I turn it over to our presenters, just another quick plug that we are going to do a Q&A session at the end. And Jason is on to help facilitate that Q&A session. So please, throughout the presentation, feel free to send over your questions, and we will get to those at the end of the presentation. All right, without any further ado, I am going to send it over to Anne and Melanie to introduce themselves and start the presentation. Thank you both.
Thanks, Alyssa. I'm really excited to be here today for this coffee break. I work in ESG, obviously, but any opportunity to kind of talk to people about this topic, I enjoy. I feel like right now it's a huge topic area, and there are a lot of questions going around. What is it? What does it mean? How do you get into this field? Which I never guessed when I got into sustainability over 20 years ago that it would be kind of the hot thing in business. So it's been an interesting ride, and a bit about my background. So as I said, I started in sustainability about 20 years ago. I did my undergrad at UC Berkeley in international environmental policy. I thought I would maybe join the UN or do field work, but I quickly learned that field work was not for me. I did a lot in agriculture and kind of development and that side of sustainability. And I think that also crosses into social justice and things like that, depending on the kinds of projects that you're working on. And I ended up getting into technology kind of by chance. And then I went back and got my MBA. I focused on sustainability in that MBA program, did an internship for a natural gas distributor, and then I joined Capgemini, which is one of the bigger consulting firms of the planet. And I joined as a technology consultant, but then I founded an employee resource group that was all about community engagement and sustainability. Then I kind of leveraged that to build out those programs formally for the company, for the region, for North America, and did that for a few years, built it out quite well, and then wanted some product experience. So I went into manufacturing, and I was really focused on product sustainability. So that was a lot of looking at chemicals of high concern, certifications, reporting, different things like that. But then I missed consulting. So I came back into the world of consulting. And I also wanted to focus on ESG as a whole and not just sustainability, because that's like one piece of it for me. So I'm really excited about this work that I'm getting to do in Protiviti, currently helping to build out our ESG practice and also working on client delivery and ESG. So that's me. Turning it over to Anne.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Anne Zappis, and I'm a consultant at Protiviti in the IT audit practice. Last May, I graduated from the University of Maryland College Park, and I knew I was interested in helping companies follow through on their commitments to addressing environmental, social, and governance issues. And as I started to begin my work, I realized that there's increased demand within internal audit for leaders to take a more strategic role and identify emerging risks and encourage best practices to enhance business functions. And one of these emerging risks and opportunity areas is ESG. And I'll pass it over to Melanie to give an explanation.
All right, thanks, Anne. So in our coffee break today, we're going to cover what is ESG, what is the driving the need for these programs, for ESG programs, looking at a model approach to ESG, and then getting into a little bit about how can I break into this emerging business priority. So let's go to the first bit, which is what is ESG? A lot of people tend to think that those letters stand for environment, sustainability, and governance, or something like that. It actually stands for environment or environmental, social, and governance issues. I would say that term can be used in a variety of ways, but those are what the letters essentially mean. And we're really looking at that set of factors to understand the non-financial impacts that an investment or a company has on the planet, that it has on people, which are part of this planet, and the business overall. So it's like looking at that triple bottom line, if you've heard that term before, of people, planet, and profits. And so it gives you a better understanding of what I would call the meta elements, which are the environmental, the social, the governance factors. Things like on the environmental side, you might see climate change, carbon emissions. Social, you might see DE&I. Governance, you might see ethics. And we'll go into that in a little bit more detail later, but just like high level understanding. Also, this is becoming more of an issue, or has more eyes on it, because as we're looking at these ESG factors, we're starting to get a clear picture of ESG metrics. And with those metrics, investors are really able to understand more about an investment that they're making. It's understanding how sound an investment can be, or like Anne mentioned, understanding the risks and also the opportunities that are happening for an investment. It's giving us a more consistent, more coherent, more comprehensive system of corporate disclosure. So as you look at ESG, again, sometimes people think immediately only of the environmental side of the E, of carbon emissions and those kinds of disclosures. And those are super important, but that's just one piece of ESG. When you're looking at disclosures, that's also taking into account the social disclosures, the human element. It could be looking at human rights. It could be looking at discrimination and those kinds of issues. And then with the governance side, it's looking at things, like I said, ethics, but also things like corruption and those kinds of disclosures of affirming that we are operating ethically. And here's our proof in how we are doing that. And right now, and I would say in the recent maybe 5 to 10 years, there are so many more companies that are developing these ESG programs. They want to know how they're performing, the investors care, customers care, employees care. And it's really just, again, helping everyone to understand the risks, the opportunities, and how we can essentially be better stewards of our resources, and understanding how these different elements are impacting the business, impacting us, and also how we are impacting the world through those different factors. We can go to the next one. So I mentioned these at a very high level on the last slide, but this gives you a little bit more understanding, a little bit of a deeper dive into environmental, social, and governance factors. Some that I like to point out, because these are just kind of my favorite ones, like I'm an ESG nerd, so I get excited about these factors. But some of the ones that I've really enjoyed working on are circular economy on the environmental side. So this is where you hear things like cradle to cradle design, or circular economy, circularity, and it's really getting out of that linear thinking of take waste as you're making a product, taking the product away, and then just throwing it away, and really thinking about designing a product with the end in mind. So how can I design a product that at the end of its life just becomes a valuable product again, instead of just going into landfill or just kind of floating out in the ocean or something like that. So I think that's really interesting. Carbon emissions, climate change are huge. Energy, wastewater, all of these are very big environmental issues that are very important to the health of people and the planet. On the social side, I think the one that immediately comes to mind for most people is diversity, equity, and inclusion, especially with the events in the last 2 years. And this has kind of been the top of mind social factor that a lot of companies and people are grappling with and trying to figure out how to do it better and do it right. But that's just one part of the social aspect. And one that I find really interesting in this area as well is data privacy and protection, which most people wouldn't think, oh, we're doing ESG through data privacy and protection, but you actually are. If you're in countries in Europe, for example, this is a huge social issue. And I think more and more we're starting to see people make that connection and understanding how that is a social issue. And it's becoming a very, I would say, a huge topic with security breaches, data that's being lost or held for ransom, things like that that are happening in the world right now. Governance, also a huge one, anti-corruption, ethics that I've talked about before. But I find the interesting one here that I wouldn't have thought about before getting into this work is management structure and pay. So when you're looking at executive level compensation, that's actually a governance issue that people are talking about. That's boards are meeting about to understand, okay, in our business, we're paying our executives this, but is that really the right rate? Are we paying them too much? Are we paying them too little? Is this on par with our peers? What do we need to look at here? And I think another one that's coming into play is board structure and compensation. If you look at the recent letters from the CEO of BlackRock, for example, there's a lot of talk around board structure and diversity, equity, inclusion at the board level, which becomes a governance and sort of a social issue. So it's kind of an interesting one. All right, we can go to the next one. So when you're looking at ESG programs, people are often thinking, if you're at the beginning, what does that even mean? What can I do with my ESG program? So this is just an idea of different people, different titles that would usually be, or I would say commonly included in an ESG program. So you'll usually have a chief sustainability officer or a lead, someone like that. Usually have a formal board committee. So it might be called the ESG committee, sustainability committee, something like that, that the board is actually having a working group that's specifically focused on that work. Also supporting the efforts would be an executive ESG steering committee, because like one person shouldn't be making all of this decisions by themselves. Usually you want kind of a board or a steering committee that's going to be coming from different parts of a business, maybe from different geographies, different departments and things like that. So you have a more clear and comprehensive, holistic understanding of issues. So you can also have holistic and comprehensive solutions to those problems. You have ESG teams, supporting structures, and then advisory councils. So again, for me, sustainability ESG is a very interesting place in business because it's one of the few things that really cover a huge area of the business, like HR or legal. So it doesn't really fit in one thing. So you usually are having to work or bring people together from different areas of a business to come together to understand what are we doing, what is this issue, how can we solve it, and how can we build this program. All right, we can go to the next. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Anne.
Great, thank you. Now that Melanie has laid out some understanding of the foundation of ESG as a concept, I'm going to walk us through some of the drivers that are causing businesses to create these ESG programs. There are a lot of different benefits that can arise from developing ESG programs and executing them effectively. There's increased need for ESG programs because of the increased scrutiny that we have around environmental, social, and governance issues. There are climate concerns that are accelerating a desire for sustainable finance and also for resilient supply chains. And this can help companies mitigate their physical risks of climate change with natural disasters and droughts and other unfortunate events. There are social concerns from customers and investors, which are motivating businesses to increase their DI program transparency and also make responsible sourcing and data privacy commitments, which increase brand strength in the marketplace. And there are also reputation and compliance concerns that have prompted businesses to assess their oversight of governance issues. And ultimately, leaders across industry and across geography are looking to ESG programs as a potential source of revenue to capture the sustainability-focused customers, and also as an opportunity to decrease their costs from better management of their natural resources, better management of their human resources. And even though there's research that it does drive financial performance, it's not only the metrics that drive the performance, it's the strategy behind the metrics and the strategy behind ESG programs that can really make the difference. And one driver I haven't touched on yet is the regulatory environment. US regulators in March signaled to the market that ESG disclosures are moving from a nice to have to potentially required. The SEC, Security Exchange Commission, opened a request for comment on climate disclosure, and their proposed rule aims to improve the comparability of company reported climate risks, similar to what Melanie touched on before. If there's no cohesive, comparable corporate disclosure, investors aren't able to understand how sound their investments are. So this would help investors make better decisions, customers make better decisions on companies to support. And outlined here is the proposed rule, though the scope of the final rule hasn't been determined, as it's open for public comment through at least May 20th, 2022. And even if adopted, it will apply to most companies beginning with their 2023 annual report. So there's a lot of movement, there's a lot of reconsideration of reporting and disclosures as a result of this open for comment or request for comment, and companies are interested in understanding how this will impact them in the future and what risks and opportunities there are. I imagine that many of you on the call may be working in financial services or may be interested in how ESG will impact our financial system. And this wheel here depicts 9 areas of opportunity where ESG is impacting financial services and where financial services professionals can also accelerate the transition to an economy that can sustainably meet our needs and wants while also tackling urgent social challenges. So these different areas show how by addressing ESG risk and opportunities, financial services can provide facilitation of value and exchange that's more accurate with data and technology, with audits, and with disclosures. They can provide secure storage of wealth. They can offer mechanisms for risk management with these emerging risks, and they can also maintain trust and confidence as we transition to a net zero economy. But all of this isn't possible without the governance, risk, and compliance folks on the call who are able to create a source of reliable data that is near real time to make these investment decisions, and to have internal auditors and risk and compliance professionals who are the stewards of these ESG programs, creating this source of data. And this wheel outlines 6 areas of opportunity for the governance, risk, and compliance professionals to provide value in ESG programs. Opportunities for functions all across the business, as Melanie mentioned. It's not just one silo, it's touching a lot of different functional areas. And as such, it's important that the governance structures of the ESG program, that the task force, that the upper level management create a program that isn't siloed. And I'll pass it over to Melanie to present a model approach for ESG programs.
Thanks, Anne. So we can go to the next slide. All right, so this is like one model, one approach. There are many different approaches, but something that I see as a common theme in the approaches to ESG is a holistic one. As we've discussed in the previous parts of this coffee break, sustainability isn't something that is just one piece of a business. It really does touch all parts of the business, and really no matter what your business is. I'll often get people saying, oh, you know, my business is just it's just I don't know, a digital platform, or it's just an app or something like that. But really, no matter what your business is, sustainability is a part of that. You're using energy, you're traveling, let's say pre-COVID, but you're going to have some sort of impact, some sort of thing that you're doing if you're doing activity in our current kind of world. So I think the one thing also to understand is that sustainability is not fixed. It's a continuous journey. It's something that requires complex thinking, a team that is across the business or coming from different parts of the business. There's not really a blueprint. There's no like, oh, I can take the solution out of the box and just go and put it into my organization. It just doesn't work like that because it's such a complex thing, whether you're looking at the problems or the solutions to those problems. And oftentimes the solution just means other problems. So you have to kind of understand that it's a journey. You're not going to get from, you know, A to Z in one action or in 1 year, but you can go from A to like 8.5, or you can go from A to B and get there a little bit incrementally over time. So this circle that you're looking at, this is one model, an approach to ESG. So if you're looking at the left side, those outer elements are those ESG meta topics that I mentioned in the beginning. So those are the things we already went through, like climate change on the environmental side, DEI or data privacy on the S side, ethics, management structure and pay on the governance side. So those are kind of the elements that work together for understanding how those elements are impacting a business, and also understanding how the business impacts the world through those kind of avenues. Then if you look at the more inner circle, that'll show you more about potential activity areas that I have seen are common that people want to focus on. So strategy and planning tends to be hopefully the first thing that we're doing, is figuring out what are we doing, what's our purpose, why are we here, who do we want to be, what do we want to be known for, what outcomes are we looking for, what are we trying to address, what problem are we trying to solve. So that's the strategy and planning. And then the others, I wouldn't say necessarily there's an order. And there's definitely not a rank of importance or anything like that, but looking at stakeholder engagement, looking at operations, performance and reporting, data management and tools, and governance, risk, and compliance. And I know for the kind of accounting minded, the governance minded, reporting is usually top of mind, especially with the recent SEC proposal that came out in March. And as we're moving toward possible regulation in that area, more and more people are asking about reporting. But I think before you get to that state, you have to look at the strategy, you have to plan, you have to understand the key challenges, the risks, the opportunities, understanding who you're impacting and how, understanding your kind of your reason why. And I think the benefit of having these models and doing activities in this way helps you to create the purpose and value of the organization. So you really want that culture of your organization to be grounded and anchored in the purpose and value that you can create and use to drive the business through ESG. I can go on to the next one. Thanks. So again, reporting seems to be top of mind for many people in the ESG space, or people that are interested in that. And there are some major frameworks that are being used in this area at the moment and just in general. So I'll often get a question of, okay, well, which framework should we be using for the business? And again, I will bring people back to, you first need to understand your why. What are you trying to achieve? What's your outcome? What's most important for you, your business, your investors, your employees, your customers, and many things before you get to the selecting a framework stage. But some of the big ones that I have used and am using are from the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, that's SASB, the global, and I would say SASB is much more focused on the financial, the accounting side, as the name would suggest. They have all kinds of different facets of the framework depending on the industry that the business is in. I highly recommend you go to their website and check out some of their content. They have a whole lot of great content there and a lot of good things if you're just wanting to learn more about SASB, about reporting, about the accounting side of that. Another huge framework is the Global Reporting Initiative, or GRI. This is looking at, I would say, the many facets of ES and G. Some of the frameworks that you'll see out there, like the Carbon Disclosure Project or CDP, are great, but only focus on one piece. For CDP, it's the environmental side. Versus the Global Reporting Initiative really has a more robust assessment of not just the environmental side, but also the social and the governance. And they have a required kind of process that you go through and a set of questions that you need to answer, data that you need to submit, activities like a materiality assessment that they require a business to do in order to kind of say that you're working within their initiative. A huge one that I love is the UN Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs. And this is a set of goals that the UN has developed, and it kind of covers a spectrum of goals we have as a planet, as a kind of a global community. So these are goals like no hunger, clean water, access to certain resources. And it's kind of it's a great place for some companies to start when you understand, okay, this is the kind of business we're operating. Let's say it's like a manufacturing company and they manufacture clothing or something like that. Well, they're going to have an impact on the social structure. They could have an impact on who they employ for creating their textiles. They could have an impact on water because of the wastewater from their facilities where they manufacture the textiles. Maybe they want to have a community program where they're helping local, local artisans to be able to start their own businesses or microfinance. So like you can kind of pick and understand what goals are most aligned to the business and then anchor your program with those. The UN Global Compact goes along with those SDGs, and it's really an agreement or a commitment that companies make to follow certain guidelines from the UN related to the SDGs, and also to report periodically on progress toward those goals, and also progress in general for the business with respect to ES and G. We can go on. So, oh, sorry. Anne, were you going to say something? I'm sorry.
No,
okay.
you're good.
So one of the other big facets of ESG, which I think is a huge importance right now, is data. At the end of the day, I would say ESG is a change management issue because usually you're trying to change the very fabric and culture of a business to do something new, but also with data. Because so much of the reporting, so much of understanding your performance, it's all anchored in data. If you want to know how much carbon you're emitting, you have to know how much energy are we using? Where is this energy coming from? How much water are we using? Where is it going? How dirty is it? Who's testing it? Like so many of these different pieces of data. And there is a huge challenge right now in the ESG space with first obtaining the data. And then understanding that a lot of it is unstructured, it can be fragmented, difficult to gather, and also making sure that you have some governance around that, like in the gathering, who's deciding how that's gathered and who's making sure that the right numbers are coming over. So a lot of it is also highly manual at the moment, there's a lot of Excel spreadsheeting going on in the ESG space, which leaves a lot of room for human error. So, you know, somebody might have put a decimal where it should have been a comma. And if you've worked in Excel, you know, it can be a nightmare if you have an extra space somewhere in your formula. Like, it can destroy everything. And you might be trying to figure out in, you know, 8 tabs of data where this extra space is happening. So you can imagine if you're in an organization with 100,000 people and, you know, 10,000 facilities worth of energy data, doing that manually is very difficult. Doing that in an unstructured or fragmented way is very difficult to actually figure out your metrics. Like, how are you actually performing? And sometimes that gathering is obviously inconsistent. So this is where the advent of ESG data tools are really rising to popularity right now. IoT is a huge player in the space of ESG with gathering the data at the kind of device level. There are a lot of tools that are helping to calculate carbon emissions by using things like energy invoices from the, you know, utility company. They're able to calculate those emissions, but then there are other tools that are consolidation tools where people are uploading the invoices, putting in additional data so that they can just have a centralized point for that data. So when you're reporting, you might have to report on energy, waste, water, packaging, recycling numbers, but you also might have to report on your diversity and inclusion. So what percentage of women are in management, or how many underrepresented groups are on the board, or, you know, so your ESG metrics are not just from one part of the business. Again, it's really from so many different parts that might have different processes for gathering. So how do you bring some uniformity to that? The tools are a great way to do that. And with that, it makes your reporting usually easier year over year. It can reduce cost from time, from as many people needing to be involved over time. And also can help you improve your performance, because if you can measure it properly, then you can understand what you're doing now and also understand steps then to improve in those areas. All right, can go to the next. I'm going to pass it to Anne to talk to you about how to get into the business.
Thank you. With the emerging professional scope of this call in mind, I wanted to take a little bit of time to talk about how I got into this area coming out of college last year, and encourage you on the call who are interested in retooling your skill set to pursue ESG as an area of interest for your career, and a little bit of how maybe you can go about that process. To start, you might be thinking ESG is a buzzword. How do I set myself apart from all the other people who are using the buzzword as someone who is genuinely interested and informed and knowledgeable on the topic? And one way to do that is by getting a certification. You can pursue a certification at any one of these. These are all varying levels of commitment and cost. And some of these are sponsored by the frameworks that Melanie mentioned before. SASB, Sustainability Accounting Board, Standards Board has one, and GRI, Global Reporting Initiative, has one. And there are also certifications offered by universities in sustainable finance. And depending on your specific industry that you're working in, there might be something like sustainable infrastructure certifications that could be interesting, or urban development that could be interesting to pursue, depending on what your path is. And I think that something to consider is that networking is also an important area when going into a new career or launching a new career. And there are a lot of different professional organizations where you can build off of the connections you've made on this call today and join the International Sustainability Professionals organization, or maybe a green building council or diversity best practices, depending on what you're most interested in. And outside of these two action items, I would definitely encourage you all to start reading ESG reports. That's how I started. I just got really curious about what are the companies that I buy from doing? What are they reporting? What is the standards of reporting. You know, there's very rarely a bad ESG report right now because everyone is trying to make themselves look very positive and there's very little regulation. So you can take it with a grain of salt of what type of marketing is out there, but you can really dig in and see what the reporting is. What are people doing? What policies do they have in place that you can review on their website? What goals do they have for the future? How are they backing up those goals with data? And I think that that initial interest and search can really be fruitful for you as you try to launch your career and see where you can add value, honestly, what just interests you the most. And if you aren't ready to pursue certification, definitely the organizations here will help create a community of like-minded people. And if you have any questions about anything that we talked about today, definitely reach out to us. We're open to any of your questions, and I'll pass it over to start the Q&A portion.
Great. Well, thank you, Anne and Melanie. I'm sure we all feel empowered to go back to our organizations and be the stewards of our own ESG programs. And, thank you for so much great information here. So we do have a number of questions that have come in, and we'll get right into it here. I did want to say actually that it was interesting that you pointed out that data privacy was included under the social issue, and I work in cybersecurity, and I thought that was a very interesting point because in addition to companies being focused on their own resiliency programs, we also have a commitment to the communities as well, and our customers, and so I thought that was a great point as well. But just for starters here, I know that Anne, you just kind of covered some of this. We had a question about the types of certifications that are available in the industry. So I know you went over several, but is there any that you or your colleagues hold in particular, or for those just getting started in the industry that you'd recommend over any of the others?
That's a great question. I don't have a specific one that I would recommend. Depending on the industry that you're in, there might be some more specific learnings you could do, or depending on your level of expertise already, there are different levels of certifications as well. Melanie, do you have anything to add?
I would say the same. I think, yeah, Anne hit it spot on. It's kind of like the same for organizations wanting to know what framework to do. It really depends. It depends on where you want to focus. It depends if you're more of a generalist in ESG, or maybe you want to focus specifically on green building, or specifically on energy, or specifically on DEI or DEIB with belonging, as it is kind of progressing into. But yeah, it's going to really depend more on your interest area and your goals versus like there's one that's necessarily better than another.
That's great. Thank you, Melanie and Anne. And we did have a follow-up question come in as well, just on this topic. We had an audience member that was interested to know if ISACA is getting involved in any of the certifications in the space, but I'm not sure, if you're aware or if you can speak on behalf of ISACA, but just wanted to see if you knew or, the answer to that question.
I do not.
Okay.
Maybe
Okay.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure actually either. I don't think they have one out right now, but we can look into that. I don't know, Tim, if you know if they have anything in the ESG space.
Yeah, I don't think they did, because I was doing some research on the site just to see, if we can highlight any thought leadership they have. They have some articles on it, but it's not in relation to their frameworks. But watch this space. There may be one coming soon.
Okay, thanks, Tim.
Yeah, I know I've already seen a lot of great resources being posted on the ISACA website as well. So it seems like we're starting to compile a lot of great information on this topic. But in terms of the next question here, what are the best tools that you use to help manage ESG. I know that you mentioned during the presentation, there's a lot of Excel spreadsheeting, that's been going on for a little while, but just any other tools that you've seen is kind of helpful to establish these programs.
Yep. So quite a few, depending on where you are, what you're focusing on. So there's some that are kind of coming up right now, like if you're already doing financial reporting with a company like Workiva, they now have an ESG kind of solution available that will be is very similar to the financial reporting aspect. AWS just came out with their, I think they call it Carbon Lake. So that one is specific to carbon reporting, with calculating. I think right now it only does scope 1 and scope 2 emissions. What you will find, I will say this as an aside, is for carbon emissions, you can find a ton of different tools that will calculate scope 1 and scope 2, but scope 3 is kind of the Z factor where people are like, we don't do that, because it's very complex. There are a lot of different pieces to scope 3 emissions, and it's just more like, it's more complicated, more difficult. So the scope 3 is sometimes more difficult to find, but I think AWS will probably end up doing it. That's Amazon, for those who don't know. Another one that I've seen is worldwide generation. So that one's much more of like a response consolidation tool, so that you can start putting all of the answers and data for a specific framework into that tool, so that when you need to report or you need to submit your response, it's just much easier. Everything's in one place, and you can engage your suppliers in that as well. Another couple that I've used on the green building side are mindful materials. And that's more of a way for manufacturers to kind of show what they're doing with products. Ecomedes is kind of a similar one as well, but it helps to bring all that information into one place. I'm sure that I'm forgetting some that I've seen, but if you have specific questions, just feel free to reach out. I can give you some additional ones.
Great, thank you. And we did have one follow-up question come in. Just in terms of what types of metrics reporting do you see companies compiling? So I know we touched a little bit on it so far, but if you wanted to expand on that a little bit.
Can you clarify what you mean by metrics reporting?
So yeah, the question, what types of metrics reporting do you see companies compiling? So I know that you already talked a lot about the different metrics that you'd compile. But yeah, that was the question that we had.
Okay. And
maybe maybe they're thinking about how to determine which metrics are material.
Oh, yeah.
And conducting materiality assessment by surveying stakeholders internally and externally can help a company determine what metrics to report and what data needs to be compiled and the controls around that data that need to exist in order to have that reporting.
Yeah.
That's a good place to start, along with the scoping questions that Melanie mentioned about why are we doing this, who are we serving with this ESG program.
Great, thank you, Anne. Appreciate it. And we'll switch topics here, but what are some of the biggest challenges that your clients are currently facing in this space? I know it's constantly evolving, but they're kind of an ongoing theme. It seems like a lot of clients are having.
I would say there are a few. One is that a lot of times this work is being done by a very small team. So just bandwidth, resource constraints, time, that's just like overall, I would say a problem or a challenge. Another is the reporting side. So people wondering again, which framework should we use? What kind of data should we be gathering? This is particularly of interest with companies that are about to go public or recently went public, because they have a very different set of eyes on their data and on their disclosures. And so they really want to know what are our investors going to care about? What is kind of the public want to see? What's important for us? Another that I've seen, reporting is big. disclosures, looking at data and wanting to make sure and validate that the data is true, that the process is happening, that that what they're reporting is accurate. We do not really do assurance though, so we're not affirming that. We're just like assessing, if that makes sense, and saying, hey, you might have a gap here, things like that. Anne, do you see any other ones? Might have missed something.
No, I think you hit on some good ones.
Yeah. Oh, another one also is operation side. So it could be like, you know, we want to figure out what a good target is for us. Like, do we need to go carbon zero, net zero? What kind of percentage reduction in our emissions makes sense? And so we can help like with that process as a challenge. But a second part of that challenge is, okay, we have that number. Now, how do we actually reach that? So it's looking at the operation side of maybe it's facilities, maybe it's manufacturing process, maybe it's different parts of the business that they're trying to figure out how to actually meet the target.
Can I just piggyback off that quick? I just had a question because I see like the framework that was up there and it had like cybersecurity in there, for example, and like other components that typically you might see like in the ERM process, like being covered. Do you see clients or people that you work with struggling with kind of finding that balance between like overall ERM and now you have ESG and potentially like this new framework, and then you've got your NIST and cyber framework and things they're working on, and kind of the overlap there and like the reduction of duplicate efforts? Is that something that you see people struggling with, kind of how to figure that all out?
Yeah, definitely. I think the ERM conversation is becoming more of a topic because people are maturing in their ESG processes. And we're at one point, I would say even, let's say 5 years ago, most sustainability environmental programs were with corporate responsibility, where now they're kind of moving into this different space because of the reporting, the investors. So it's moving to align sometimes more with finance and things like that. And as that's happening, it's changing the relationship to ERM, and much more people are saying, okay, well, now we need to include ESG in our risk assessment. And how do we do that? And how do we make sure that our controls are making sense? How do we make sure that it's all working together and we're actually addressing risk and assessing the right thing? So I see that conversation happening more and more. And I think the future is probably that ESG will be a piece of ERM instead of them being separate, or because it's kind of one piece of risk, right? It's not like everything, but it's certainly a large component of many parts of the business. So especially depending on the business, if you're like, I don't know, if you're a seed producer or working in agriculture, ESG, climate change, like those issues are going to be very material for you. And just depending on the type of business, I think they're already starting to merge those two a little bit more because they've had to. But it's a very big conversation right now.
Awesome, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And we did have a follow-up question come in. How do you ensure consistency across corporations and industries? So, what I would expect is many of these programs are customized to each organization, but there was a question about this. I don't know if you have any thoughts.
I think that's a little bit of what the regulators are trying to accomplish with the SEC's proposed rule of having some sort of consistency in what is required. So there might be differences in the frameworks that they use, but the ultimate reporting would be more uniform.
Yeah, that's a great comment. Yeah, thank you, Anne. And then, I guess, Anne, you actually spoke about this next question a little bit. It says, are there any good resources such as newsletters or bulletins that you go to for the most up-to-date information around changes to ESG requirements? And, Anne, I know that you talked a little bit about getting information, by looking at other companies, ESG reports and learning more about the space. And but is there any other news feeds or newsletters that you'd recommend?
Yes, there's a newsletter called ESG Today that comes out every day and provides some updates that I read. And there are other newsletters depending on your specific function area within business that you're most interested in, but that one usually gives a pretty broad perspective. Melanie, do you have any that you regularly go to?
Mine are varied. I recommend if you have like specific areas, Google Alerts is really good. Because then, when things pop up in the headline, you get to read about it. I think I use a lot more my industry organizations, and honestly LinkedIn, because most of my network is very focused on ESG in some way, shape, or form. And so I'll look through what people are posting about, articles there. I'm part of USGBC, which is the US Green Building Council. And I'm on the LEED, which is, it's a building standard, which the name I can't remember. But the LEED Advisory Council at the national level, and then a Georgia Market Leadership Advisory Board on the state level. So we kind of talk a lot in that group. But also I really like Green Biz. They put out some really great content with articles. They always do a kind of state of sustainable employment every year. They focus on really cool topics. They have very cool webinars, good articles. And so I'll follow them pretty regularly. And then some industry stuff around sometimes green building, things like that.
Great, thank you. And any final kind of parting words for those that are just getting started in this space or kind of dipping their toe in, any final comments or words of encouragement for them?
I would say get curious about the space. It's a very wide variety of risks and opportunities, and there's sort of a place for everyone with different interests to get involved in helping create a higher level of accountability for companies.
I like that. Yeah, get curious. Just do it. Like I said in the beginning, I've been in this space for over 20 years, and I love that it is constantly evolving and changing, and there's always something new to learn. It's like it's everything, right? So no matter what you're interested in, you're gonna find some connection to ESG if you're a human on the planet. Like there's not really anything that's untouched by some piece of this this area, because it's like it describes our life kind of as humans, as consumers, as people and businesses. So yeah, just learn about it, learn about things that interest you. And I think also finding other people that are also curious and also learning and also talking about these issues is awesome. And yeah, if you have questions or anything like that, feel free to reach out. My email address is there, Anne's is there. I'm also active on LinkedIn, so if you want to message me there, feel free.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Melanie and Anne. Really appreciate it. And this concludes the Q&A portion. So back over to you, Alyssa.
Awesome. Well, I just want to thank you both, Anne and Melanie. Awesome presentation. Thanks for answering all our questions. And Jason, thanks for helping facilitate that questionnaire, that question round. So appreciate you guys. Thank you. For everyone on the call, thanks for joining. Sorry, some of you had some issues with the link. The recording will be available, so all of you will be able to take advantage of that in case you joined a little bit late. I do want to say we do have a lot of events coming up. So if you guys want to check out what they are, you can go to isacany.org and check out our chapter events tab for a list there. We do have our leadership series continuing tomorrow with the third event. It's a great series. If you guys haven't checked it out, definitely try to do so. With that, I will end the presentation and thank you all for your time.
Bye, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.